started. Helen's going around passing around candy. So if you guys don't know, it is Halloween, so I'm dressed up. Cousin Freddie is a cousin Eddie from Christmas vacation. So that's if anyone's wondering. I do have props, but I don't have everything. So this is it. Any wardrobe malfunctions, just let me know. Just raise so I'll pass it off to Helen. Okay, so thanks all for coming today. Today we are going to be going over a few Workday changes that happened on October 7th, 2019. So we'll be going over what changes there were there, and then we'll have a refresher on the part-time support staff collective agreements, specifically the employee type definitions, and different provisions that they have access to within the part-time support staff collective agreement. Regarding the Workday changes, there are also some tips we're going to go over, specifically about recruitment, compensation, benefits, and those tips will help you do your job in terms of managing part-time support staff a bit better. So this session is meant for both managers and budget officers or anyone with timekeeper roles, so it's a good mix in terms of questions as well. So you have the managers here who might ask questions which will help the budget officers and vice versa. We are going to start by going over the 5 employee types, provide the definitions and examples. So the different employee types, the 5 of them, this is one of the topics that has consumed most of the time or in the past, and overall in terms of questions. You know, the type of employee I have, what type of employee are they within the part-time support staff collective agreement, so this should hopefully clarify a few things. We'll follow this with the Workday updates again, and you'll hear perhaps that these are known as the Phase 3 Workday updates. So this is the Phase 3 updates. And we'll end with tips and tricks, specifically as it relates to Workday. If you have any immediate questions, just feel free to jump in or raise your hand or just shout out a question. At the end, there'll also be a Q&A for questions. And one last thing, the session is being recorded. However, we're probably not going to use the recording for anything. We have other recordings if you want to refer back to it with the same content. Perth and Pembroke, there were minimal registrants from there. They are smaller campuses, so they may have already attended the previous 3 sessions that we had. With that, I will get started. All right, so the agenda for today, I already went over them, so I'll skip this slide. So Phase 3 changes went live October 7th, and we'll go over that in a minute. Starting with the part-time support staff collective agreement, as you all know, it went live or got ratified on February 21st, 2019. So that means before that, you had part-time support staff, and that's what they were known as, part-time support staff. Now they're known as part-time support staff with lots of different terms and conditions of employment. So you'll hear the abbreviation PTSSCA for the part-time support staff collective agreement, and that's probably the abbreviation I'll use just for brevity. The CA contains the terms and conditions of employment. So in the past, part-time support staff used to get a contract or a terms and conditions letter. Now the actual terms and conditions of employment is within the collective agreement, which has all conditions of employment. So no more contracts. When someone, part-time support staff is hired, they won't get a contract. They'll get an offer letter with reference to the collective agreement, similar to the full-time support staff. Within the part-time support staff collective agreement, there are 5 distinct employee types, and we'll touch on every single one of them. And if for the actual collective agreement, you can find that on our website. So if you go to algonquincollege.com /HR and then click on employee relations and then click on collective agreements. And there you'll see the 3 collective agreements of the college. One for the full-time support staff, one for the part-time support staff, and one for the academics. Okay, so the 5 employee groups or 5 employee types. Regular part-time, also known as RPTs, casual employees, temporary employees, students, and project of a non-recurring kind, also known as PNRK. With all 5, there are specific highlights or specific provisions that they all have access to. Starting at the top, they all will be paying union dues. Whether you work 1 day a week or 5 days a week, you're paying union dues to both local and provincial unions. All 5 employee types have access to overtime, so if any of the employee groups work over 40 hours a week, they'll get access to a time and a half for their pay rate. And we'll touch on the asterisks over there in terms of working over 24 hours a week on a later slide. All have holidays, and it lists out the articles or the days in Article 13, similar to the full-time with a few differences with regards to Christmas holidays, but they all have holidays that they get paid for as per ESA. Vacation pay in the past, employees. Hello, Lisa. All right. If you can hear me, that's great. I can't see or hear you, so I'm not.
Sorry, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. No need to see you, I guess. If you can see us, that's great. All right, so vacation pay. All part-time support staff in the past did not have access to specific vacation pay per se until later in the term of their employment where they got 6%, and then after ratification of the collective agreement, now all part-time support staff have 6% vacation. So every pay period, they get their pay rate multiplied by 1.06 to reflect 6% of their pay, and they can use that for vacation, or they should use that for vacation. With that, they also have access to vacation days. So let's say they want to take a vacation sometime down the road. They basically put it into Workday, they get a vacation, and basically it's a day off. They're not paid for that specific day as it is. They've already been paid it in the previous pay periods. They also have access to a few types of leaves, specifically bereavement leave and pregnancy leave. Bereavement leave is paid up to a certain number of days, and depending on who you're bereaving, you'll get a specific number of days that are paid. The other type of leave is pregnancy leave. It's as per Article 15.5. So every single one, I'm trying to source the different article that it refers to if you want the full context or the full criteria to be able to utilize it for your employees. Pregnancy leave, again, is unpaid, and it's as per ESA. All 5 employee groups can use the grievance procedure. They can use it for different reasons, but they all have access to grieve something if they choose to do so. All have access to breaks as well. After 5 hours, they get 30 minutes of unpaid break, and Courtney will be touching on that later. And again, all get offer letters. Again, whether you're working 1 day, full stop, or you're working indefinitely 24 hours a week, 5 days a week, you get an offer letter, which will state, where you're working, how many hours a week, when your contract ends, if it ends, and the fact that you belong to a collective, to a bargaining unit, and you have a collective agreement. So all the information will be there. Any questions so far? Yes, I was going to give you the mic for Lisa. There is 2.
I just have a quick question for regular part-time employees. There's some confusion with I'm not sure where they got this. They're entering vacation. They're requesting vacation in Workday. Do they need to do that?
That's a good question. So, let me get that. Someone else. So yes, they do need to request the vacation in Workday for tracking purposes and for reporting. So they do need to request it in Workday.
Is that new?
I'm getting nods here. Do you want to speak to that at all, or you want to keep it? Okay.
Yes, it's to record the time. They're already paid, but it's new to Workday. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So does that mean only ones that have a schedule? Because let's say I have banquet people that don't have schedules. They're not requesting days off because they don't even have schedules to request days off. So how does it work for casual people?
So it could still be people that don't have a regular schedule. So essentially what it is part-time employees at the college receive 6% of vacation pay on each pay. That translates into time off work, even though it's unpaid. So for an RPT, for example, who works 24 hours per week, 6% of those 24 hours work out to 15 days per year of vacation. Casuals, similar formula, but probably less vacation because they might not be working 24 hours per week. So it's just really to record the time that they've taken off. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were scheduled or not that day, but if they're saying I'm going to be off and not available for work during this time for vacation, the tracking of it in Workday won't pay them any extra, but it'll just allow us in the future to do reporting and things like that. And also for the department to make sure that they're sticking within their entitlement as well, that they're not taking more days than what's allotted. So it's really just for reporting and tracking that we made the change that they could enter it into Workday.
So just to summarize, they're not getting paid the 6%
They
per
are.
paycheck. They are getting paid the 6%?
They're getting paid the 6%, but only what they work.
Yes.
However, when they put in the vacation, the actual day isn't paid because they already got paid the 6%.
Okay, so it's just booking time off unpaid, technically?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
Sorry. Sorry, so because our campus services staff don't have access to enter hours, does that mean timekeepers and managers have to do it for them then? Or can they request time off? They don't have a request time button on their Workday, but do they
Okay.
have a time off?
This is more a question for Workday.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out. Do they have time off?
Sorry.
No, I could be confused. No, they don't have time, so they can't enter their hours. We download it. But they might have time off. Okay, yeah. I might have just answered.
Thanks for answering that. Okay, so regular part-times, again, RPTs. Definition. RPTs are employees that are employed in a continuous position of indefinite extent with regularly scheduled hours on a weekly basis. Keywords here are continuous, indefinite, and regularly scheduled hours on a weekly basis. So meaning forever, permanent. So some RPTs could be less than 12-month positions. So you can have an RPT that's 8 months of the year every year, 9 months of the year every year, 10 months of the year every year, 11, and 12. Just because they're laid off for the 4 months or the 2 months or the 1 month doesn't mean that they're not indefinite. They basically work 8 months, take a layoff 4 months, and come back for another 8 months afterwards. So very similar to full-time support staff. Some RPT employees could, again, sorry, I just said that, so they could occupy less than 12 months. For the most part, most of the employees are 12 months, so they work every single week with some different, like some exceptions. They work every single week or scheduled hours every single week. So that's where the regularly scheduled hours on a weekly basis comes in. Defining it, you have the indefinite nature, maximum of 24 hours a week. That's the maximum you can hire someone into an RPT, and that's the maximum you can plan and schedule for. That's what the collective agreement states in terms of part-time capacity, that they normally have to work 24 hours or less, or up to 24 hours. So you can have an RPT working in your department 5 hours a week, every week, forever, 10 hours, 24, but up to 24. When you have a vacant RPT position, you do need to post it for a minimum of 5 days. Again, similar to the full-time support staff, where you have a vacant full-time support staff, you post it for 5 days, similar, so same here. And again, similar to the full-time support staff, when you post a full-time support staff position, you need to look at full-time support staff applicants first. Same here, you post an RPT position, you need to look at RPT applicants first. And then you can go into all the other internal people at the college, applicants at the college, and then you look at externals. So it's like 3 tiers. With regards to specific provisions that they have access to shift premium, and Courtney will touch on that. They have also access to citizenship leave and jury witness duty. Union leave, so some RPTs are part of the union, either as representatives or as stewards or part of the bargaining team. Developmental leave, I think this is touched on later, but you basically have RPTs that can ask you, hey, I have a development for 1 week, PD I want to go on. Can I do it? Can I go on it? You can accept that either as a paid for the full duration. You can say, half of it will be paid, half of it won't. So it's at your discretion, and as long as there's a good business case to accept or to decline such request. And you always have your generalist if you want to connect and see if that makes sense, your thought process, or your manager. Also, on-call and callback, there are specific provisions in terms of extra shift or rate premiums if you have your employees on call or planned for callback. Also, RPTs are the only ones or only employee types that have access to the seniority, to have seniority. So every new hire, every new RPT hire, it goes on probation for 936 hours. So they have to work 936 hours as an RPT before they get off probation and then get added to the seniority list. Seniority list can be beneficial in a few ways. So for example, it's used during layoff. If there is a layoff, then you look at the person with the least seniority, for example, or in terms of competitions, if you have a competition that you are looking at 2 RPTs and they're both great, everything's the same between the 2, you look at the one with more seniority. So there are multiple ways that we do use seniority. Any questions about RPT specifically? Okay, so we're going to look at a generic example for an RPT. The most common example is you have a food services clerk or rep, I'm going to say. So food services rep, working in food services, working 24 hours a week, Monday to Friday, every single week. So they work maybe 5 hours every day, minus a few hours on Friday. So they have regularly scheduled hours. You can also have a client service rep in the RO, for example, working 10 hours a week, 9 months of the year. So there's a 3-month layoff there when there isn't much traffic for students. So they're only working 10 hours a week, maybe 2 days or 3 days, and that's it. Their schedule could change every now and then, but they work 10 hours on average. Their schedule could change in terms of they work different days. Their schedule could change in terms of working maybe extra to 15 hours if they have availability. They could work 5 hours depending on the week, but they have regularly scheduled hours. And the third example is you have an ITS rep working 5 hours a week every week. There are some weeks, though, that you know that you're going to have a peak in work. So you ask them 2 weeks in advance, can you work 10 hours a week in 2 weeks? And then after that, you know that you're going to have a drop in service. So you say, hey, can you work 3 hours in 5 weeks? So as long as you give them enough notice, so 2 weeks notice, you can change your schedule. The one thing about changing hours is you can't drop more than a half of what they're originally hired to. So if you hire them as a 24-hour per week employee, you can't say you're going to be working only 10 hours for the next 20 weeks. That's limited at 10 weeks. So if you do have to do that for operational reasons, then we'd have to go through the layoff process. So you just
I just have a quick question about schedules
Yes.
for regular part-time. So a lot of our regular part-time employees have a fixed schedule, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
right? But sometimes they request to switch their days to come in on Friday instead of Wednesday, for
Okay.
example. Do we need to change their schedule if the employee requests it?
If the employer requests it, so in Workday-wise, it's better that you do change your schedule, yes. However, you're asking, do you have to in terms of accommodating? Is that what you're asking?
No, we usually accommodate,
Okay.
but then when they put in their hour, we get, right now we get the alert that
In
the
Workday, yeah.
employee.
So it is better to change their hours in Workday. I know it is tedious because it's just one-offs here and there, but
Yeah.
it is better to change their hours. I know there are leave implications. Let's say that week they come sick. They're sick on the day that they weren't scheduled, but they are actually scheduled, then it's not tracked in any way. So they want to take a sick leave, they put in sick leave or sick leave for 3 days or something. But then Workday is going to say, why are you booking a sick leave on the day you're not scheduled? But really they are scheduled, right?
Oh, I see, okay.
So it's, yes, update their schedule on Workday.
Okay.
You can ask follow-up if you had.
No, that, I think, so, but in, sorry. But we don't need to go back and correct the past ones, because
No, I think the past ones, it's
it's
done.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Temporary employees. So temporary employees or temporary part-time employees are employed in two different ways. They can either be similar to an Appendix D. You have a full-time support staff who goes on leave for some reason, then you have an Appendix D backfill. In this case, you have an RPT, again, an indefinite employee. They go on leave for mat leave, or they go on sick leave for something. Then you hire a temporary employee to backfill. So when you create that new employee type to backfill the RPT, you hire them as temporary. The other way that you can use a temporary employee is if you have a reason to only hire a part-timer for up to 9 months. So let's say you have a project or an increase in workload for 4 months, you hire a temporary, up to 9 months. Defining a temporary part-time position, all temporary positions have an end date, whether you're replacing someone or you're here for an under 9-month period. It's no more than 9 months, so it has an end date. Again, maximum of 24 hours per week. Temporary employees also have access to shift premium, which I mentioned Courtney will touch on. And if you do choose to vacate a temporary position, so let's say you have the person backfilling someone and they happen to come back earlier, that's one reason you would want to vacate or terminate the employment. The other reason is you no longer need a temporary position, for example. So you would do that as per ESA. With that, you'd give them a minimum of 1 week's notice. That's worst case, you give them the 1 week notice. Best case, you give them 2 weeks notice. Again, just to keep engagement up, to just courtesy. But again, 1 week notice at the very minimum, 2 weeks notice ideally. The other last option is you just have the contract come to an end naturally, and then you don't, that's it, end of contract and relationship in the specific context or role. So if we're looking at temporary examples, I already talked about the first one. You have an RPT who's on leave and you need to replace them, you replace them with a temporary. Second is if you have a short-term increase in work, 2-month peak in work, you consider it temporary. Again, up to 9 months. So what could happen is you have an increase in workload for 9 months, and then you have another increase in workload the year after for 9 months. That's no longer temporary. Now it's an RPT because it's 9 months and then 9 months. Same thing if you have 8 months contract, temporary, and then the year after you have another 8-month temporary contract. I mean, it's a trend now. You have 2 years. It's an RPT. And that's the last example down there. To clarify one thing, if you have an increase in workload of 2 months and then the year after you have the same increase of workload for 2 months, that's still temporary because it's within the 9-month duration. Any questions about temporary?
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question about that?
Yes.
In the past, if the temporary position was going to be 4 months or less, we didn't have to post it. Is that still true with the collective agreement?
Yes, but Helen, you want to confirm?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
One note here. So I gave the example of if you have an increase in workload of 2 months every year, that it's temporary. However, if you know you're going to have this increase in workload every year, whether it's 2 weeks or 2 months or 5 months of increase in workload, you need to workforce plan to accommodate that increase and incorporate it into your RPT. So that means increasing the number of RPTs you have and potentially dropping the number of hours overall, that we have at least a stable employee force. So you basically look at all your schedules for all of your RPTs and see what sort of peaks and valleys you have based on trends for the past 3 or 5 years. And you say, you know, I have always an increase in February, so I'm going to see if I can hire maybe an RPT at 10 hours, and that's what they want to work, 10 hours, and let them know that, you know, there are going to be times where it increases 24 hours, for example. So you just average out the hours of your RPT. So the point there, strategic workforce planning of your full-time and part-time support staff. Again, full-time as well is consideration here. If you have lots of part-timers, perhaps a full-time position is timely here. So workforce planning is required to ensure that operations are run efficiently while meeting the obligations of both collective agreements. Okay, so now about casual. Casual employees are those who work on a call-in basis or do not have regularly scheduled hours on a weekly basis. So casual employees do have an end date. Again, maximum of 24 hours per week. And similar to the temporary, when you're vacating casual part-time, it's as per ESA. And the classic example of a casual employee is, say you have event services, and every now and then you get event requests from the public or from internal clients. And you can't plan necessarily for this. You can ballpark how many events you get in a certain month, but you don't know which day. So those would be ideal for a casual workforce. And again, this is the case if you don't have an event every single week. You have events one off here, one off there. You have a roster or a list of employees, or sorry, a list of individuals who you have as a casual roster. And you just, now that you have an event on Saturday from 10 to 5, you call up your casual list and say, hey, I have an event from 10 to 5. Are you available to work? If yes, great. You hire them. If not, then you just go on to the next person on the list. There is no seniority with casual employees. There's no obligation to, try to work things out in terms of work hours. You have your list, go through it, and hire someone who exactly meets what you need. If the individual says, I can only work 11 to 5, not 10 to 5, then maybe look at someone else on your list. And again, they can decline the assignment with no repercussions. So, any questions on casuals? Okay. Student employees. So student employees are employees who are students who occupy positions that are only made available to current students of the college. Again, only for active college students, Algonquin College students. There is an end date and a maximum of 24 hours per week. And in terms of vacating a student position, release them as per ESA. There are multiple reasons why you'd have a position that you'd only offer to a student. It could be their unique experience in a class, or it could be because you want to ensure that the students get real-life experience in a specific task or field, or you want to hire someone who relates to students because that's the biggest client you have, whether it's a greeter position, for example. So if you have a position and you're like, I'm not sure if this is a student position or not. I mean, I could hire a student, but I don't want to or I don't have to if I can't find one. So ask yourself this. If you can't fill this position with a student, what are you going to do? If you say that, well, I'll just fill it with a non-student, I'll fill it with anyone else, then that's not a good reason to have a student position because you're filling it with a non-student. So don't designate this as a student position. Designate it as a temporary or casual or RPT or anything else. The idea here is if you hire it as a student and the year after you hire it as a temporary, year after back to a student, you're taking away work from the temporary, and then you're not standing true to the reason of a student employee or what it's defined as. So again, back to the question, if you can't fill this position with a student, what are you going to do? If your response is, I would just leave it unfilled since the whole purpose of the role is to enrich students' work experience, then you can designate it as a student. So common examples here we have, I think it's tutor positions where they hire specifically students because they have experience in a specific class and they can be tutors to other students who are taking that class. I mean, that's a position only a current student can fill or a student can fill. Other one is, again, a greeter position. The manager, for example, states, I want to give the students real-life experience and I want them to relate to the students coming in, so I'm only going to fill this greeter position with a student. That's another reason to use a student classification. Any questions on students?
I just have a quick question. I'm not sure if this is the right place or a Workday. So we hire student ambassadors in recruitment, and we get money back from CSEP and international. Is there a way in Workday to identify those students as international or CSEP students? Because we need to report back to get the money.
That's a good point. So CSEP, ISEP are both under the part-time collective agreement. And then you have Appendix G, that's with the full-time collective agreement. Then you have co-op, which is not part of any collective agreement. So your question is there a way to to identify or distinguish between CSEP and ISEP and Appendix G. So if they're under the student position, they're either going to be, if they're under the part-time support staff student position, they could be one of three things, either CSEP, ISEP, or just a regular student, neither CSEP or ISEP. I don't know about the subcategories, so I'd let Helen speak to that if she knows.
I feel like when we create the position, that's one of the reason codes, but you can reuse those positions. So if you reuse it for someone else, there's no way. Sorry, so Amanda's saying that we can distinguish it by business title. So, I mean, when you're completing the hire, you can now change the business title to whatever you'd like. You're physically able to type in the title, so maybe that's how we do it. We can brainstorm.
Okay.
I know for when I've helped some of the other clients that I have and they want a specific title, so for example, they'll reference like fall term in the business title, you're right. And if that's something that you need, I think that maybe that's one way we can do it. Because positions can be reused, and you know, just because we created it for one reason, you can use it for a different reason. And there's, like, unless you look and use the same one for the same reason, it's hard to keep track of. I think the title is a good idea. Anyone else with other suggestions that you can think of?
Linda in the back.
I have a question. So if a student finishes their program in April and we want to hire them for that summer, are they still considered student?
No.
No,
So once they're done their class, then they're not considered students.
Okay, and
last
then
day of class, yeah.
what if they're in the transition of going to another program and restarting in September?
If there's confirmation that they have another program starting, I believe that could be considered a student.
What
but
would be considered confirmation?
Like registrar's office saying that this person is
That
registered.
they're
Yeah.
coming in? Okay.
But we haven't experienced that yet, and I think it's safe to say that they're a student. Again, if it's a term after. And 100% confirmation. So to your first question as well, the reason that it's at the end of the last class, because if we say till the end of graduation, graduation is something that could be delayed till whenever they actually want to do it, and then that could extend or manipulate what their status is.
Linda, I think for something like that, that's something that's specific. Maybe the first time we run into that, we might want to validate those pieces with the registrar's office, because I know they have very specific definitions as to currently enrolled student, and it's pretty weedy, like it's pretty detailed, and so we might want to just confirm with them, because sometimes that delay between finishing this semester and then picking up registration again, like it could be one semester, maybe two, so it's hard to say.
Verify CSEP students are or are not part of the collective agreement? They are. And also, if a student, same question, I guess, if a student finishes the winter term and is coming back in the fall, are they still eligible to be employed as a CSEP student during the summer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. And the last employee type here is the project of a non-recurring kind, or PNRK. Similar to the other three, they have an end date. So similar to temporary, they have an end date. And with PNRKs, there's a maximum of 12 months that they can be employed. And even though this is a part-time support staff collective agreement, the hours are not part-time in this context. So to be a PNRK type of employee, you have to have hours scheduled or assigned that are between 35, 36.25, 37.5, or 40. So there are distinct hours to select from. So why you'd hire a PNRK is if you have a project of a non-recurring kind, up to 12 months, requiring an employee who has full-time hours. If you want an employee to do a project of a non-recurring kind and part-time hours, that's a good reason to have a temporary employee. The difference is part-time hours, full-time hours. Again, here they have access to shift premium. and they're released or terminated as per ESA. We don't have too many PNRKs at the college. It's not exercised as much. Usually it's either accommodated through other part-time, so other temporary employees or full-time employees who take on a project. Any questions about PNRK? Perfect. I'll pass it off to Helen.
Thank you. Does anyone need a break? Quick break? A stretch? A howl? No, nothing? Okay. Okay, so we wanted to let you know how the Workday updates affect you. And I need a clicker. Thank you. So before October 7th, we had 3 categories for the part-time support staff: regular part-time, student, and part-time support or fixed term. Now the fixed term aspect of it has been expanded to include temporary, casual, and project of non-recurring kind. So you should be able to select this or all of these categories that are part of the collective agreement now in several areas. The first one is when you're asking for a position to be created on the Excel spreadsheet, you can select one of the 5 categories or classifications. I'll go back. So if you're not quite sure, we do encourage you to look in the collective agreement first. If you're still not sure, if you'd like to talk it out with someone, Ralph will be happy to talk to you, and your generalist will be happy to talk to you as well about which category we think works best for your situation. And when you're submitting a requisition, you can confirm the employee type as well. We have done some cleanup of the old positions that said part-time fixed term positions. However, if you have some that you're not sure about, just when you're submitting the requisition, you can confirm it is a temporary position or it's a casual position or a project of non-recurring kind. You can also double check at the higher stage that the category that you want is the one that's been selected for the position in the higher stage. And another update is that my understanding was Workday wasn't configured quite correctly for part-time support staff when it came to breaks. So now that's been fixed. And so after 5 hours of break, and this is this is legislation, the employee is entitled to a 30-minute break. And so now when the employee submits their time, it's automatically taken off of the 5-hour shift. So it's more than 5 hours. If they work more than 5 hours, it'll be deducted the 30 minutes. Any questions about that? Great. In a recruiting refresher, we've had some pain points together combined. We're all learning Workday, and but I do want to say that it's been a lot better this term than it was, the previous term. So I know it's still hard, but everyone's doing a really good job, and we're just getting better. So don't give up. The next term will be even better for us. But just going over a couple of things that we've seen, I guess, some of our combined pain points with. Selecting the right employee type. Some of our issues come from right from the position. If we don't create the correct position, then the employee won't get the correct offer. They won't be entitled to certain benefits, for example, if they're full-time, or they won't receive the correct orientation. So it's really important that the position is set up properly to begin with, so the person gets paid accurately and on time. Replacement positions as well, we've seen some issues with reporting. So when a temporary employee is replacing a regular part-time employee, or in Appendix D is replacing a full-time support staff employee, when you submit the requisition, it does ask you, there's a field that says, who are you replacing and what is the reason. So for example, if an employee is replacing someone on mat leave, or parental leave or sick leave, we do need to indicate the name of the employee being replaced and then the reason for that. The name is not a required field, so it's really easy to skip, and a lot of people have been skipping. And unfortunately, then we have to call you and find out because the union requires these reports every 2 weeks. So please submit your recs with the information. Duplicate accounts is something that we've seen a lot as well, and it's a big issue, and a lot of times we don't find out it's a duplicate until the employee tries to enter the SIN, and it won't let them. So to try to prevent that, you can do it. It's a 2-step process. First, we search for the employee's name in the Algonquin College Workday search bar. So just put in the employee's name. If they're an active employee, it'll pop up there, unless they give you a different name. That's happened as well. Some people go by several names. But so if they're currently an active employee, what you would do is an add job instead of hiring them again. If you don't find them in the search bar and you're hiring them outside of the recruitment process, which is you're not posting, you're just hiring them from the requisition, then you look for the pre-hire in the existing pre-hire search bar. And the people that'll pop up in this area is if they've been terminated in the past, so they were a former employee. So first search to see if they're active, then to see if they've been terminated, and then hopefully we won't have any more duplicates. If there is in a progress situation, I have heard that that's one area that we're missing as well, but we've asked for Workday support on helping figure that out as well. Position management, the staffing bar that some people don't know about is an amazing bar that you can use to see, which positions you have, which positions have requisitions attached, which don't, that you can use for the future, and also to see what's in progress. So if you put in your supervisory organization, or just type in, if you're a manager, your own name, you can see your supervisory organization pop up. You select it and select the staffing tab, and you can see everything that you have in your org chart instead of seeing them, one by name. It's listed. It's really nice and is a great overview for you. And for full-time positions, we just wanted to give you a friendly reminder that it's always best to start at the beginning of the pay period. If it's outside of the pay period, Workday doesn't calculate the hours, so it's a manual process for our payroll people. So we just have to give them a heads up and say, hey, starting someone late or, the Monday after the pay period, and it's a manual process. So it doesn't work, unfortunately. So we do encourage you to start full-time employees, or especially if there's a change job, at the beginning of the pay period. And ending or extending positions. So fixed term positions, for example, for part-time academics or even temporary support employees, although there is an end date, you still have to end them, unfortunately. So it is important to end them after they've been completed. You can future date terminations, or say you have a 2-month contract or 2-month offer letter, but a contract for an employee, a temporary employee, and you'd like to keep them for an extra month, you can extend that position as long as you're in line with HR 07 and are not extending past the 4 months. Any questions about that? So yeah. So the question was, are you extending the position in Workday? And that's right. Yep, you can extend it in Workday via change job. So you go into the employee name. Under the employee name, it's an actions tab. You go into actions, and I think the tab is change, transfer, or promote employee. And so you submit, you click that button, and one of the reasons is change in end date. Extend fixed term, I think it's called actually. But does anyone have their Workday open? Extend fixed term employee or contract. What's the code for? So we'll walk through it together. It's just extend fixed term, that's it? Okay. There's a specific code, yeah. But it's through a change job, so you can do it yourself. Data change, extend fixed term. Any other questions about that while we're confirming?
I just have a comment while people are looking up that reason code. On the compensation side of things, we have seen individuals attach an end date to someone's compensation. And in specific cases where a position is extended past the original end date, that end date on the compensation doesn't change. So we have seen individuals who have come through Workday with a pay rate of $0 because there was an end date attached to compensation. So we've just been advising people not to put any end date on anything that's monetary in value. It's okay to have an end date on the position, but none of the compensation should have an end date of any kind, because when the position ends or the employee stops entering their time, their compensation will just end because of that, but we don't want it to automatically get deleted. So just a comment about that.
Okay, so just in case you needed the exact language, and we're using Kurt as an example. You go into the employee's name. You can just search it in the search bar. You go into actions underneath the employee's name. Job change is the next tab. For anyone who has a laptop, you can follow along too. And we can cancel any process. Transfer, promote, or change job is the exact language. And then why are you making this change? The reason code you're selecting is data changes. And extend fixed term position. And then you would enter the date and the rest of the information, and you would confirm. So you could extend it by a month, for example, or 2 months, as long as it's under 4 months. If it's over 4 months, then we should probably post, depending on what position it is and how many hours worked. Any other questions about that? Okay, great. Next, we have some information regarding benefits and leave.
Hi there, I'm Susan Dever. I am one of 2 benefit and leave partners. Mitchell Morrison is another team member. I'm wearing leaves and prescriptions for benefits and leaves. That's my cool costume for the day. With respect to this, I'll just go through to the next one. There's 2 different types of leaves. There's time off entitlements, and these are used for short-term situations. These are the ones that are entered 1 day at a time. So that would include, there's a list here, including bereavement leave, jury leave, anything that's doesn't have a long-term impact to benefits. Then there are other leave entitlements that are used for long-term situations, and these are your parental leaves, your maternity leaves. There's also the leave with pay, short-term disability, and that's dealt with through the disability management team. So for the legislated leaves, such as maternity, parental, and extended parental leave, these leaves are legislated and they cannot be denied. So, and also there's different benefit impacts to these types of leaves. When someone goes on a maternity leave, for example, they'll maintain their benefits at the same cost sharing. They'll accrue vacation, and they will also have job protected leave. There are a list within the presentation. I'm not sure if the presentation has already been shared, but within here, you'll see the list of the time off plans. Basically, for any employee, when they go into Workday, they will have whatever options are available to them through the drop-down. So if your employee is looking to take a time off and record it, the drop-down will only show the entitlements that are eligible to them. And also, if the employee wants to try to take more than the maximum, they'll get an error message. So Workday will only allow what is allowed for that particular employee, and it will take into account any previously taken leaves. Within the spreadsheet, too, it will also tell you if it's paid or unpaid. And here again are the leave types, whether they're paid or unpaid. The pregnancy or the maternity parental leave, depending on the employee group, that may be entitled to the top-up. It's typically for full-time employees or for partial load employees during the period of their term. And for any maternity or parental leaves, you would always come to your leave partner because we're the ones that have to enter those. So the vacation days for part-time support staff, Ralph had previously mentioned this, that on every pay, they will receive 6% worth of their scheduled work hours. So they'll be paid for every paycheck, and they'll see this on their pay stub as vacation pay 6%. And also, as we had stated, that for any vacation days, the employee will want to enter request time off for those days that are in the system. Thank you, my tech guy. And then the last slide is just about the employee self-serve. A reminder to every employee in the college that if there are any inbox items in your workday, to always action those. And sometimes when you action your inbox items in Workday, that will trigger more items to come that are behind that you can't see. So just to make sure that everything is kept up to date, that everyone should always make sure that their inbox items are done. And for specific to leave, as employees have to enter their own leaves into Workday, the approval will come to you in most cases. It will come to it will come to the manager. In certain scenarios where it's private or questionable, they will come to the leave partner in our inbox for attention. And if we need to reach out to the manager just to verify that the leave is approved, we will do so. And that's it for leave. And is there any questions? I think we kind of covered some things off at the beginning. Great, and I'm here for the duration if you think of anything. Yes, Courtney.
Thanks. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Courtney. I'm one of the compensation officers at the college. So the next few slides are just going to go over some compensation items and some changes for phase 3. The first slide, although not technically compensation related, is just a request of our disability management department. They wanted us to include a bit of a reminder and also to highlight how this process for entering time has changed with phase 3. So our WSIB process at the college is not changing as part of the introduction of Workday or the support staff collective agreement. But what has changed is the ability to just enter that time into Workday. So similar to what Susie was just talking about, there's a lot more time entry capabilities now, and WSIB is one of them. Again, it's just for tracking and reporting purposes so that we know when somebody is off work due to a work-related injury. So just a few reminders. Again, the process at the college isn't changing. So we do have HSO 5, which goes over the accident and incident policy at the college, and it also goes over which party is responsible for reporting what. Again, we have 2 disability management coordinators at the college, so really they're the primary contact if you need to be walked through the process for this. None of this is new information, but if you do have any questions, let me know. What has changed is just the ability to enter this time so that our DM team can do the proper recording and reporting and tracking of any part-time members who are off work due to illness or injury. Any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward. The policy is there if you ever need a reminder, but really this just covers anybody who has lost time at work for any reason due to an incident that happened at work, if they seek medical attention, or if they're requesting accommodation that's greater than 7 days. So that's kind of your definition of when to consult this policy and to reach out to your disability management team. And they'll walk you through the entering of time if need be and the tracking of that. So next are the 2 compensation-related matters. So Ralph mentioned earlier the new entitlements for things like shift premium and overtime. So I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. So with the introduction of the collective agreement, all regular part-time, temporary, and PNRK employees are entitled to shift premiums in Workday. These shift premiums now are automatically calculated when the employee enters their hours for any hours worked during 5 p.m. And 6 a.m., which are the shift premium hours. So again, it's only these 3 employee groups that are entitled. So casuals and students are not entitled to shift premium. This, the bottom part is just a bit of an excerpt from the collective agreement. So it's basically saying that for all hours worked between 5 p.m. and midnight, the employee will get an extra premium of 75 cents per hour. For any hours worked between midnight and 6 a.m., it's $1 per hour. If the majority of their hours are worked during the time where there's a higher premium, the whole shift will be paid at a higher premium. So for example, if they worked like 11 p.m. till 6 a.m., it's all at $1 instead of an hour of it being at 75 cents. So that's straight from the collective agreement, but what it looks like in Workday is this. So the employee will still be entering regular time in and regular time out, so there's no specific code for shift premium, but you can see on the Wednesday here that the employee has indicated working from 3 p.m. till 11:30. So Workday will automatically calculate 6.5 of those hours at the shift premium rate, because it will start from 5 p.m. till 11:30. So it really takes the work out of it for the employee to figure out what their hours should be entered as. You can see at the top, it will also provide them with a tally, so then they can make sure that those hours are being paid at the shift premium rate. So you can see that they have 8 regular hours, 6.5 shift premium hours, and then their meal breaks are taken. One important thing to note here is that even though casuals and students aren't eligible for shift premium, the configuration of time entry is the same for everybody. So it will show if a casual works between 3 and 11:30, it will show a tally in the shift premium column, but it won't actually pay them any premium pay. So it's just something we wanted to highlight here, because you may have employees that are asking questions if they see some of their hours kind of getting tallied in the shift premium column, but that they're not getting any extra money. It is in their collective agreement as well, so they likely will know that they're not eligible for shift premium, but just wanted to show everybody what it looked like so that if anybody was asking, they kind of knew what the employee was seeing and why they were questioning it, but they won't actually get paid anything extra on their pay because of it. Does anyone have any questions about shift premium? Yeah. Yes, I may have to consult the collective agreement, but...
So I have to enter the shift premium for my full-timers, and I have one person who always works 3 p.m. to 11:30.
Mhm.
So their half-hour break would always be after 5 o'clock.
Okay.
So when I enter the shift premium, I only enter from 5 to 11, because they really should only be getting 6 hours of shift premium, not 6.5, because they have an half-hour
Unpaid.
unpaid break. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's a good question. I don't know if Workday takes out we obviously know it takes out that meal period for part-time employees.
Because I look at the calculation, I'll enter it and
Yeah.
just save it, and then I'll go in. I looked at the calculation where you can go into the actual tab itself and then blow it up a bit more, and it says 6. What I've actually entered, it'll take what I've entered.
Yeah.
Because they really shouldn't be getting shift premium for the unpaid.
For the unpaid, no, I do agree with that.
Correct?
It's just whether or not Workday does it automatically when you enter time. Because I know for full-time employees, the meal breaks are taken into account, but the regular hours aren't being entered by anybody. That's just, automatic.
She's pretty good at checking to make sure it's there, and she's
Yeah.
never told me I didn't get the right amount of hours. So I'm just curious about that.
I will find out for you.
Okay.
Can you just send me a quick email?
Sure.
Just shift premium full-time?
Sure.
And I'll remember, and I'll find out what the right answer
Okay,
is for that.
thank you.
I don't know it right now, but I'll get it for you. Okay. So overtime works similarly in Workday now as the shift premium does. So just a bit of a reminder, there is a change to the overtime entitlements for part-time support staff as introduced by the collective agreement. So many of you may know that the Employment Standards Act actually dictates that we pay overtime after 44 hours of work per week. But the part-time support staff collective agreement specifically dictates that any part-time support staff will receive overtime after 40 hours of work. So this is different than the legislated standard. It's a greater benefit for them. And as such, it's been reconfigured in Workday for part-time support staff. So it may be kind of a rare occurrence that part-time support staff are getting this overtime payment for working 40 hours a week, because we know that RPTs are limited to 24 hours per week. So this is likely more so going to be either under exceptional circumstances or possibly because they have more than one position. So I'm going to go into what it looks like if someone has one position or multiple positions, because the entry for that in Workday is a little bit different. If a part-time support staff employee only has one RPT or part-time position, and they work over 40 hours, their time entry is the same. They enter their regular time in and time out, and the hours over 40 will be automatically calculated at the premium rate by Workday and paid out accordingly. Where it becomes a little bit different is if someone has more than one part-time support staff position. They do actually have to indicate the hours that are eligible for overtime from the drop-down menu when they're entering their time. So if they have 2 positions, they'll enter all their time for each position, but any of the hours that go into over 40, they will have to, instead of entering regular in and out from the drop-down menu, they will have to specify that it's OT at 1.5. So they may have questions about that. It is something that they will see as an option in the drop-down menu, and they do know the entitlement from their collective agreement, but if you're seeing any hours come through over 40 at regular, it might be because they didn't know to select overtime from the drop-down menu, so just something to look at. There is a screenshot on the next slide as well, so I'll show you what it looks like. What this won't apply to, though, is someone who has a part-time support staff position and a faculty position, for example. If they've worked 39 hours in their part-time support staff position and they work another 3 hours as faculty, although that's over 40 hours, it was not 40 hours worked in their part-time support staff position. So they're not eligible for overtime if it's over 40 hours. That defaults to the Employment Standards Act of over 44. So just watch for those people with more than one position that they're not entering overtime when it's a position outside of part-time support that caused them to go over the 40 hours. And again, sorry, I know it's small, but this is what it looks like. So because there's no code for overtime for someone that has one position and it's regular in and out, that's what you'll see as the reasons for the time entry. So I've included the employee view and the manager view. But you can see that on the employee view, they've entered 45 hours for their week, and 5 hours are under the overtime column and 40 are under the regular. And it's the same on the manager side. So although you won't see the type as overtime, there will be a tally at the top to show you that the employee is going to get paid 5 hours of overtime. So just something to look for when you're approving the time, especially to make sure they haven't entered it in error or where it's not warranted. That's it for comp. Other questions?
Does Workday take care of Appendix Ds if they go over 40 hours? Or is it a manual thing you have to do as well?
No, I think the only configuration that has changed thus far is just for part-time support staff. So the Appendix D job profile should be set up the same with no changes. So if it's not working currently, that's one thing. But everything should be configured appropriately for the employee type for Appendix Ds.
Because I've never paid overtime to an employee in Appendix D. I thought Workday took care of it if it...
Yeah, if somebody works over, so they would be ESA 44 hours because they're covered under the full-time collective agreement when they're working in an Appendix D.
Okay.
So they wouldn't be going by the part-time support
Okay.
staff rules of
Okay.
40 hours.
Okay.
They're covered under Articles 6, 7, and
So
10 of the
44.
full-time.
Okay.
So it'd be over 44, and Workday is configured
That's
to
what I
pay
thought.
overtime
Yeah.
like by ESA rules.
Okay.
It's just this was a change that was never configured in Workday, so it's part of the new process
Right.
for part-time.
Okay, so it does take care of it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Linda has a question.
If a part-timer has 2 contracts with 2 separate departments, who gets charged the overtime?
That's a good question. So we had this question come up in a previous session, and what will happen is the hours that cause them to go over 40 will be the ones they have to enter as OT. But in terms of so that would be the department that it would get charged to. However, Sometimes those are only a few hours out of their full schedule, and it really should be their substantive position, for example. So there is a workaround that Ruben probably has to shed more light on, but there's a way to adjust in the background the cost center that overtime gets charged to. So what has been happening in those cases is the timekeeper or the manager of that employee will be in touch with us to say, this individual went into overtime in my department, but only worked 2 hours. Then we have to get kind of the home department involved and confirm with them that the overtime should actually be charged to them. So right now it's kind of a communication between the two different departments, because it will by default just be the final hours of that week that the employee enters as overtime, because it's only once they hit 40. So right now it's kind of between the two departments, and the managers to say, you know, they have the substantive position with us. This is the bulk of their hours. The overtime should really be charged to us, and payroll can make that correction too.
Okay. And I think one more question. And is this also within the 17-week limits in the rolling calendar? Like, so if they were to have these two contracts over 24 hours, I believe there is guidelines that it can't go over. Yes?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I can briefly talk to that. So the guidance is that you don't use those over 24 hours for 17 weeks unless you absolutely need to. But if you do have to, then you do it at a maximum of 17 weeks. However, if you know that you're going to have an increase to over 24 hours a week, or if another department, wants to hire someone, but they notice they're already employed at 24 hours, then the guidance is to find someone else to get those over 24 hours a week. And using, going above as a last case, after maximizing RPTs, after maximizing other temporary, other full-time support staff, and then going into over 24 hours a week. Yes, rolling 12 months, yeah.
Nothing else?
All right, so just this is pretty much the end. Just a quick summary of the changes. So in the past, when you're in Workday, and this has already been implemented, when you're creating a part-time support staff position, it only gave you 3 options. Here's an RPT, or here's a student, or here's a part-time support staff. Now it's 5 distinct employee types within Workday when you want to create it. So as Helen mentioned, you're selecting one of those 5 employee types in that position. So that's great for reporting, great for the employee to know, great for you to easily find out what kind of employee this is. You go into Workday, you see their employee type, it's casual or temporary. The second change that happened on October 7th was that now the part-time support staff are entitled to break for 30 minutes of unpaid meal break after 5 hours of work. In the past, it was at 5 hours of work. And finally, employees can enter their own time off. I will be sending those slides, don't worry, if you're taking. No. And that is it, actually. So if you have any questions, now's a good time. Otherwise, I will be sending the slides again after the presentation is over, and then there's going to be an FAQ and then a recording, and not this one. Okay. No,
Can we see your full costume?
this is it.
No, there's a hat and a vacuum.
I feel ashamed here. There. This is it. And this. There's no cigar here.
There's a beer can.
Any questions?
For the record, not appropriate to ask your coworker if they're wearing anything under their robe.
No comment. Any?
Not appropriate.
Everyone good? Okay, perfect. If you have any questions that you think of up ahead, again, feel free to email one of us. If it's a LR question, you have myself, Helen, and Brianna, and labor relations, or recruitment question, or compensation, benefits. So all our contact is on the website. Thank you.
And thank you for coming today.
Happy
on
Halloween.
And help yourself to more candy.